these things and what is going on there in Nigeria. Very well, so perhaps a quick facts about surrounding Nigeria and its elections and what is expected from this year's elections. Nigeria will head to the polls on Saturday, as I have already mentioned there. And in a fiercely contested presidential vote that analysts say is too close to call. And there are about 93.4 million eligible voters for the February 25th polls, the sixth since Nigeria's return to democracy in 1999. Elections will be held in all 109 senatorial districts and 360 constituencies in Nigeria's bicameral federal legislature on February the 25th, the same day as the presidential elections. So two elections will happen on that day in all the 106 senatorial districts and the constituencies, and also in all the federal legislature. Now, 2 weeks later, on the 28th of the country's 36 states hold the governorship and state parliament elections in March 2023, just 2 weeks after the elections on Saturday. And it will be the largest democratic exercise on the African continent and the most populous nation, of course, in the continent. And so, how are the winners declared? Or perhaps before we get to how the winners are declared, I think it will be important for us to look at who are the candidates that are participating in this year's elections there in Nigeria. There are about 18 candidates who are running for Nigeria's highest office, that is the presidential elections, and each confident they can turn the country's fortunes around if voted into power. But opinion polls suggest three are leading the race for the popular vote, and so we are just going to shed a bit of some spotlight on the three leading contenders in this year's election. And one of the key contenders is Bola Ahmed Tinubu, the candidate of Buhari's party, the All Progressive Congress, otherwise known as the APC. Another is the main opposition leader and former Vice President Atiku Abubakar of the People's Democratic Party, the PDP. And Nigeria's presidential elections have typically been two-horse races between the ruling and opposition parties, but this year's vote has a third strong contender by the name Peter Obi, who is running under the lesser-known Labour Party. Tinubu is 70 years old and is a former governor of Nigeria's wealthy Lagos state and wields significant influence in the southwestern region, where he is acclaimed as a political godfather and a kingmaker. The affluent political veteran boasts of aiding the election of Buhari to the presidency on his fourth attempt in 2015 after three previous unsuccessful bids. After decades as a political puppet master, Tinubu declared it is now his turn to emerge from the shadows into the presidency. His campaign slogan is Emi Lokan, which translates to mean "it is my turn" in his native Yoruba language. Now I'll just pause there and then we can continue with this information that I'm giving in line with this year's election in Nigeria. So if you have a candidate whose slogan is "it is my turn," not the people's turn, not what he's about to do for the country turn, not about the things, the issues that are plaguing Nigeria's turn. He's saying it is his turn. So just looking at that and his slogan, all right, if this doesn't, maybe I'm just reading too much into this. If he feels that he's running not because he has a chance of changing the fortunes of Nigerians or addressing the issues that Nigerians would want for him to address, but it feels like he wants to run because it is his right, because he has supported President Buhari in the past and several other times, and so now he feels after all that support that he has offered and all that he's been able to do for others, it is now his turn, like you owe him this. Like he deserves to be there, I find that statement a bit problematic, because this sounds to me like somebody who has some level of entitlement for him to even think that he deserves, not because of what he's about to do, but because of the support that he has given before. So now it is his turn to enjoy this level of support. Sounds to me like someone is a bit, what do you call it? I don't know, but I have a problem with that turn, with his slogan. But maybe I'm just reading too much into it. Perhaps it has resonated with Nigerians. I don't know. You can tell me in the comment section. Now, the ruling party candidate has, however, been dogged by under criticism for abstaining from presidential debates and delegating questions about his manifesto to members of his team during a recent outing at the UK think tank Chatham House. And I think I had that conversation here one afternoon. We were looking at that, which I found to be very absurd. I don't know if his team never briefed him what really happens at Chatham House. When you go there, you present whatever it is you're supposed to present. Then after that, usually there will be a section of the audience chosen, drawn from the media houses and others, who will sit there and will ask questions. But it appears Tinubu either must have not been told, or he just didn't care, and every question that was directed to him as a presidential candidate, he picked one of some of his aides to respond to these questions, and I found that to be quite absurd. And one of Tinubu's main challenges is the opposition party's Abubakar, who is running for the 6th time following 5 previous losses. Abubakar, who is 76 years old, served as vice president from 1999 to 2007 and is a staunch capitalist who made his fortunes investing in various sectors in the country. The tycoon has been investigated for corruption in the past. However, he denies any wrongdoing, and many believe Abubakar's presidential ambition might usurp an unusual arrangement to rotate the presidency between Nigeria's northern part and southern regions. And since he's from the same northern region as the outgoing leader, President Buhari. Peter Obi is a 2-time former governor of Anambra State, who is being touted as a credible alternative to the 2 major candidates. Obi comes with a few excesses of the typical African bigman leader. He shuns a large entourage, flies economy class, and carries his own luggage. His no refills Rail's approach has attracted hordes of supporters, mostly young Nigerians who call themselves Obiadites. Okay, he also has a cult following. When people start coining their fandom towards you by coining your name and how they resonate and how they want to identify, I think that's something there, but mostly it is the young people. And Obi is also the only Christian among the leading candidates. His southeastern region has yet to produce a president or vice president since Nigeria returned to civil rule in 1999. The ruling party's Tinubu, although from the religiously mixed southwestern part of the country, is a Muslim and also chose a Muslim running mate, fueling public anger over his choice. Described by Tinubu as Mr. Stingy, Obi, who is 61 years old, famed for his frugal approach and is seen as Mr. Clean of Nigerian politics. Maybe because the reason why he's frugal is he hasn't stolen much. Maybe that's why he does not have money in excess to spend, as perhaps compared to these other candidates. But you know better. If you're coming from Nigeria, that you can tell me. However, his offshore accounts were among those found in the Pandora Papers. There you go, which exposed the hidden riches of the global elite in 2021. Obi denies any wrongdoing. Now, citizens have also disrupted by any attempt to curb vote buying by making the old currency notes useless to prevent rogue politicians from stockpiling cash. But there are fears shortage of the new Naira notes could disrupt the elections itself. So these are just some of the issues that perhaps Nigerians are grappling with at this point. So we're just looking at the top 3 contenders. I started there by mentioning there are 18 candidates who are running to replace President Muhammadu Buhari. Now, so how are the winners declared in Nigeria's election, in the presidential election? Beyond winning a simple majority, the victorious candidate also has to have at least 25% of the vote cast in at least 24 of the country's 36 states. If no candidate meets this criteria, a runoff will be conducted within 21 days, with only 2 candidates allowed to participate who garnered the required 25% votes in more states than any other candidate. If there are 2 candidates who meet the second criterion, the candidate with the highest vote tally will be picked to run against the candidate with the majority of the votes in the first round of voting. Essentially, second place in the first voting round does not guarantee a spot in the runoff. So the fact that you came second in the first voting round does not guarantee that you might be the one who will go for a runoff. Now, the election can be cancelled if wide malpractice is recorded, and in this case, a return will be ordered instead of a runoff. If now the elections, I guess, will be cancelled there, and then the country will have a fresh election like we did here in 2017. So there had been a loophole that was not very clear, a laguna in the elections law in Nigeria, which this time seems to have been addressed, and a new legislation has resolved a legal loophole that previously existed. According to Section 34 of the Electoral Act in Nigeria, if a candidate dies before the polls open, INEC, that is the Independent Electoral Commission of Nigeria, will suspend the election for 14 days for the affected party to nominate a new candidate. And if the incident happens after polls have opened but no winner has been declared, INEC can delay the election for up to 21 days. And in case, if it is an executive role, the running mate takes over the ticket and the beneficiary picks their running mate. That is, if at all, it's the president who has died. That time. In the case of a legislative role, the party has 14 days to nominate a new candidate. If the president-elect dies before being sworn in, the vice president-elect will be sworn in instead, and the new president-elect will nominate a new vice president, which has to be approved by a plenary sitting of the National Assembly. Now, the crucial election comes as the country battles a myriad of economic and security problems that range from fuel shortages and cash shortages to rising terror attacks and high inflation and plummeting local currency. For the first time since the country's return to democratic rule in 1999, none of the candidates is an incumbent or a former military leader. For the first time, President Buhari is a retired major general, and before that, all the leaders that have come, at least one of the candidates during these elections, has had a military background. But for the first time, we're having candidates, and especially the forerunners, who don't have a military background. So this is the first since Nigeria, first had its democratic elections there. So I think that's important to note. Outgoing President Muhammadu Buhari is term limited and will step down amid patchy legacy that has brought a lot of frustration and anger to Nigerian voters. And so there are, I think, a couple of issues that might form part of how the people there will decide to vote in this year's elections. And I think there are 2 outstanding issues, and that has to do with insecurity and the economy. We know right now the cash crunch, the petrol scarcity. These are issues that are likely going to be top of the mind of those who make it to the polls on Saturday, and arguably could sway the votes. I don't know if you are able to really make our votes, if we've come to the level where we are able to vote based on issues and agendas. But these 2 things could really, perhaps, because it has been tough times, not just in Nigeria, but across the world because of everything else that has been happening. But specifically, Nigerians, especially the last few weeks, has been very difficult. And the cash crunch, with the introduction of the new notes, that has really complicated issues there with the scarcity of that and also the scarcity of fuel. And so the fuel shortages policies and the scarcity of the newly redesigned local currency have stirred violent protests like we've been seeing there playing out in parts of Nigeria as millions of people struggle to get their hands on new versions of the banknotes. And Nigerians expect the eventual winner of the presidential poll to hit the ground running in finding solutions to those problems, including tackling the country's ballooning debt profile, the oil theft that also has become a serious matter, and a controversial petrol subsidy that deprives the country of major oil revenue. And I think I've taken you through some of those problems and, of course, the top contenders. Now, let me just see how some of them have responded to some of these issues and perhaps the promises that they have made during their campaigns onto how they choose to address these top issues that is plaguing Nigeria and seems to be quite urgent for the incoming leadership. Now, the top three candidates have made promises to tackle some of these issues. The ruling party's Tinubu vows to create jobs, grow the economy, and obliterate terror, kidnapping, banditry, and violent crimes from the face of the nation. And touting a recovery Nigeria mantra, the PDP's Abubakar says he wants to block government wastages by first running a small government, weaning the country off the petrol subsidy and making it the hub of crude oil refining in Africa. So that is what Atiku Abubakar has promised. And the Labour Party's Obi says his government, should he be elected, will be keen to shift Nigeria's focus from consumption to production, while also being determined to fight and significantly reduce corruption and create systems to reduce unemployment, insecurity, and inflation. So those are just some of the things that they've been able to promise during their vigorous campaigns. And so that is just basically in a nutshell. So in the last on this year's election, just a bit of statistics on what is expected to happen and what happened last time. So during the vote in 2019, there was a 35.6% voter turnout, which is way below. Way. That was an indictment, I think, on the part of perhaps the leadership of Nigeria at that time, because President Buhari was running for a re-election, and this went to show the lack of perhaps confidence and a wide voter apathy. For reasons perhaps Nigerians knows better. 35.6%. That was the voter turnout in the last elections in 2019. And in this year's election, 48% of the voters are women, 52% are men. And the total voters, as I mentioned there from the start of the program, is about 93.4 million. So if in 2019 there was 35.6% voter turnout, we are looking to see how this voter turnout will look like this year. Would Nigerians find a need to go out to vote? And the issue of insecurity in some other parts of the country that might make it difficult for people to come out and vote. How will the government handle that in terms of assuring the citizens of their security during the voting time? So these are the things that we have to look at, even as we have the last elections statistics with us. Of course, this time we have the presidential candidates. We have 17 who are male and 1 female. As I've said, there are 18 presidential candidates who are seeking for this election, and then we do have the ages between 18 to 34 standing at 39.7%, and 50-year-olds to 69-year-olds standing at 18.9%. So you can see the youth form the bulk, because even as you look at the ages between 35 to 49 is about 35.7%, and ages 70 plus is about 5.7%. So you can see the bulk of the voters are relatively young people, with 18 to 34 standing at 39.7%, and 35 to 39 standing at 35.7%. That is the voter demographic. So this is to say that perhaps, I don't know if we'll see a bigger turnout this year, and these issues that really and go to affect the young people, mostly as far as the issue of unemployment and things like this. And how would that advise how they decide to vote, and perhaps of the candidates that have been that have given themselves for this position, who has been able to speak for this voter demographic in a way that might turn out to translate to them having more votes. And so in this year's election, there are about 176,846 polling stations, and 280 stations will not have elections due to lack of registered voters. Ain't that something? Where, in which parts of the country is this, and why were voter stations created if there were no voters there registered? I don't understand that, because I'm assuming by the time you create these voting polls or polling stations, it's because you look at the statistics. Here we will look at the statistics from the Kenya Bureau of Statistics, from the Kenya Statistics some government institution. I've forgotten the exact name. That is responsible to keeping up to date with the number of Kenyans, and normally we will carry a voter registration process, and then after that has been cleaned up and the register is ready, the Electoral Commission is able to see from perhaps the new voters who have been registered, maybe is there a need to create new stations based on the figures from the voter register. But now apparently in Nigeria that's not what happens, because if you're saying 280 stations will not have elections due to lack of registered voters, so what does that mean? You created voting stations without having voters yet, or what happened there? That is quite interesting, just to say the least. So just a bit of that, and all right. So I've mentioned all of that. So anyway, we'll wait and see, even as we see how that will play out there, and it's quite interesting. Hopefully this year's voter turnout will be a bit more compared to what was there in 2019. So quite a number of issues there that might have to be considered. So the party distribution in the 2019 elections, the Nigeria's governing party, the APC, holds about 60%. This is from the last elections, 60% of the seats in the Senate. So I don't know if that will still be the case after the vote on Saturday. Well, the main opposition party, PDP, holds about 35%, and in the House of Representatives, the APC controls about 63%, and the PDP controls about 34%, and one seat is vacant, while the remaining 11 are shared by smaller parties. So it's quite interesting. It appears APC and PDP are the two leading major parties there, but we've seen 18 candidates. And this is a reduction, because in the 2019 elections, I want to believe, there were over 70 candidates, is it? About 70 or so, or slightly more, candidates in that election. So this year, saw a great reduction of up to 18 candidates, with 17 who are male and one female candidate. And so perhaps in the next coming election, maybe we'll see even a more reduced, because if you look at from the statistics from the last elections, it's just APC against PDP, even after all these other parties having been there. And in the House of Representatives, the APC controls about 227 seats, while PDP has about 121. So it's just neck to neck, and one is vacant, as I've said there, and 11 others are shared among 5 smaller parties. So that is just how that distribution is there in Nigeria. So anyway, as I've said, elections are on the 25th of February. 93.4 million voters are eligible to vote. Those are 18 and above, and they will vote in a 3-vote system. The first vote is the president, the second vote is the House of Representatives, and the third vote is the Senate. And 25% of the votes cast in at least 24 of the counties, 36 states. The president, the one who's been voted as president, must at least have 24 of the country's 36 states, at least 25%. And I think for us here, I think it's something like that. I believe that. Yeah. And also in the House of Representatives, there are about 360 members of Parliament who are elected from 36 states for a 4-year term. So there are 360 seats up for grabs. And in the Senate, there are about 109 seats in the Senate, drawn from the 3 senatorial districts of 36 states, as well as the Federal Capital Territory. So those are the figures that we are looking at, even as Nigeria prepares for its election in the coming on Saturday. Now, the economy has endured 2 recessions in the last 5 years, and the Naira has plummeted to 1/3 of its value in that time. There is also insecurity, especially in the northwest and southeast, where multiple armed groups hold grievances against the state and continue to conduct frequent rounds of killings and kidnappings. And so the current campaign period has really focused on these main issues as it is now. So we are just waiting to see how these elections will happen, and hopefully this time elections will not be postponed in the last minute. I hope that the Electoral Commission of Nigeria has worked on that, and has worked on that. So just a quick statistic on Nigeria as a country. The country has over 200 million people in population, and 39.6% of that are below the age of 35. And 53 years, that is the life expectancy in Nigeria. And the country has a literacy rate of 62%. And the country main religion is Muslim, is Islam, with Muslims accounting for 53.5%. The last I checked, it was about 49%. So it appears that population has grown, and now the Muslim population stands at around 53.5%. And the Roman Catholic is 10.6%, and other Christian churches are at 35.3%, and then others, I guess the traditional religions and all that, account for about 0.6%. English is the main language, followed by Hausa, Yoruba, Igbo, and Persian. Of course, the country's currency is Naira. We know that because it's really has been on the headlines lately. And the Human Development Index stands at 0.4% as of 2021. The country has a square kilometer of 223,768. That is square kilometers, and the GDP of Nigeria is about 440.8 billion US dollars in 2021, and the GDP per capita is about 2,065 US dollars, and GDP growth rate is about 3.6%. So that is just Nigeria at a glance for you, as it prepares to hold its 6th general election since returning to democracy in 1999. So this is just a start. We will continue with the countdown until and after the elections on the 25th of February. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. This has been Diaspora Dispatches. My name is Miriam Ogotu. Thank you for watching, and bye-bye.